Good evening. Welcome to Family Values Alliance Ballarat. As most of you know, my name is Dianne Colbert, and tonight we're going to be talking about Biology 101, what makes a man and a woman a woman. Before I start, I want to state the obvious. Every single one of us is unique. There is only one person like me. Some of you are very grateful for that. Every single person will be unique, and I have no desire to reinforce stereotypes. My goal today is to look at what are the genuine biological differences between males and females. There are many studies on different parts of the male and female body that show conclusively that we are different in a variety of ways. Understanding these clear differences is helpful. There are very real consequences of not knowing the differences between men and women, boys and girls. To begin with, I'd like to see what we already know. So we're just going to do a quick brainstorm on the whiteboard to start with. What are some of the biological differences that you are aware of? Can I have some ideas from the room?
Okay, the sexual organs.
Okay, so our sexual organs are different. Okay, so men have a penis and testicles. So we'll put that on the board. And women have a vagina. So we have different sexual organs. All right. Can anyone tell me another difference between men and women, boys and girls? Chromosomes, excellent, that's right. So what do males have? Can anyone remember? They have XY chromosomes, that's correct. Whereas females, girls and women, they have double X chromosomes. Any other differences that anyone can think of? Facial features. So some people say we have different facial features. Yep. Could be a bit harder to define. Men can grow beards, whereas most women can't. That's right. So, okay, so men can grow beards. Yep.
And men carry the seeds.
Okay, yep, men carry the seeds, so they can produce sperm, whereas a woman, she has ovaries, which men don't, and she provides the egg. Correct.
Men are stronger.
Men are stronger. I've got a little bit of a frown from some of the room. Some people aren't quite sure. We might leave that one for the moment, perhaps. But it is true that on average, men are 10% bigger in body and size to women. So on average, men are 10% larger in body and shape than women are. So that is definitely true and could be a reason why men would be seen to be stronger, which is why there is real controversy about a man ever competing in a woman's sport, for example. So these are some of the common ones. Also, women can get pregnant, right? Men can't because of that. And a woman can breastfeed. Men can't breastfeed. Okay, that's something that's unique to the sex. Females can breastfeed, men can't. Is there any other differences that anyone is aware of in the room?
Females get their periods.
Okay, so females get periods. That's right, they do. Monthly periods for females. Just take a look at the whiteboard. These are the known differences that we have in the room about men and women and boys and girls. Okay, and I'd say probably most people even watching by video would be aware of most of these differences. In the liver, there are about 1,000 genes that vary between males and females. This is why the sexes process everything from alcohol to Tylenol at different rates. A doctor recently informed me that the FDA requires new drugs to be tested on both males and females. Our bodies respond differently to many medications because of the biological differences. True or false? Boys and girls hear differently. Put your hand up if you think that's false. Put your hand up if you think that's true. Put your hand up if you're not sure. There's a few not sure. Well, it's actually true. Boys and girls do hear differently. There have been numerous studies on premature babies that have given us some insight around this area. Nell Cain in the 1980s studied the effect of music therapy on premature babies. The babies who had music played in their crib grew faster, had fewer complications, and were discharged from hospital on average 5 days earlier than babies who did not receive music therapy. However, girl babies who received music therapy left the hospital 9.5 days earlier than the girl babies who did not receive the music therapy, while boy babies who received music therapy did not leave the hospital any sooner than boy babies that did not receive it. We now have good evidence from many different sources that newborn baby girls really do hear better than baby boys. In one study, babies who were tested for hearing at the 1500 tone, especially important because that range of sound is critical for understanding speech, the girl's response was 80% greater than the boy's response. The female-male hearing difference gets bigger as kids get older. Some dads express frustration. My daughter says I yell at her. I've never yelled at her. If a 43-year-old man speaks in what he thinks is a normal tone of voice to a 17-year-old girl, that girl is going to experience his voice as being up to 10 times louder than what the man is hearing. Dr. Leonard Sachs writes, "My wife and I established a family practice in Montgomery County, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. Years passed. I wasn't thinking much about gender differences. Then, in the mid-1990s, I began to notice a parade of second and third grade boys marching into my office, their parents clutching a note from the school. The notes read, 'We're concerned that Justin or John or Michael or Tyrone may have attention deficit disorder. Please evaluate.' In some of these cases, I found that what these boys needed wasn't drugs for ADD, but rather a teacher who understood the hardwired differences in how boys and girls learn. Upon further inquiry, I found that nobody at the school was aware of gender differences in the ability to hear. I reread Professor Corso's papers, which documented that boys don't hear as well as girls. Think about the typical second grade classroom. Imagine Justin, 6 years old, sitting at the back of the class. The teacher, a woman, is speaking in a tone of voice that seems about right to her. Justin barely hears her. Instead, he's staring out the window or watching a fly crawl across the ceiling. The teacher notices that Justin isn't paying attention. Justin is demonstrating a deficit of attention. The teacher may reasonably wonder whether Justin perhaps has attention deficit disorder. The teacher is absolutely right about Justin showing a deficit of attention, but his attention deficit isn't due to attention deficit disorder. It's due to the fact that Justin can barely hear the soft-spoken teacher. The teacher is talking in a tone of voice that is comfortable to her and to the girls in the class, but some of the boys are practically falling asleep. In some cases, we might be able to fix the problem by simply putting the boys in the front row. Once, after I had done such an evaluation and made my recommendations, the parents told me that the school had advised them to seek a second opinion. "It's not that we don't trust you, Dr. Sachs," Mum said. "It's just that the school really thinks we should get an opinion from an expert." I soon learned that the only doctors that this particular school considered to be experts were doctors who always prescribed medication. Curious to know whether my experience was unique, I obtained funding from the American Academy of Family Physicians to survey all of the doctors in the Washington area. Our survey asked one simple question: who first suggests the diagnosis of ADD? The results? In the majority of cases, the diagnosis of ADD is made by the teacher, not by the parents, nor the neighbours, nor the doctor. There would be nothing wrong with teachers diagnosing their students as long as they had the training and the resources and adequate time to distinguish the boy with ADD from the boy who just doesn't hear as well as most girls do. But after talking to dozens of teachers in our country, I didn't find one who was aware of the studies showing that girls hear better than boys. "You should write a book, Dr. Sachs," one of the parents told me. "Write a book so that the teachers know about the differences in how girls and boys hear." I allowed myself a patronizing smile. "I'm sure that there must already be dozens of such books for teachers and parents," I said. "There aren't," she said. "I'll find some for you," I said. That conversation took place about 7 years ago. Since then, I've read lots of popular books about differences between girls and boys. And guess what? The mum was right. Not only do most of the books currently in print about girls and boys fail to state the basic facts about innate differences between the sexes, many of them promote a bizarre form of political correctness, suggesting that it is somehow chauvinistic even to hint that any innate differences exist between male and female. So there's clear evidence. The first major area we've talked about is that boys don't hear as well as girls, that girls hear better. True or false? The female retina is substantially thicker than the male retina. True? False? Don't know? Okay, so the don't knows win. Well, it's actually false. Anatomist Edwin Lephart and his associates found that the male retina is substantially thicker than the female retina. The male retina has mostly the larger, thicker M cells, magnocellular, while the female retina has predominantly P cells, parvocellular. P and M cells have very different jobs. M cells, which males have more of, are wired primarily to rods with little input from the cones. Essentially, they are like simple motion detectors. They are distributed all across the retina so they can track objects anywhere in the visual field. You can think of M cells as being wired to answer the question, where is it now and where is it going? P cells, more predominant in females, are concentrated in and around the fovea, the center of the field of vision. You can think of P cells as answering the question, what is it? P cells compile information about texture and color, while M cells compile information about movement and direction. The P cells send information via our own special division to the thalamus, to a particular region of the cerebral cortex that appears to be specialized for analysis of texture and color. The M cells can send information via a separate pathway to a different region of the cerebral cortex, a region that is specialized for analysis of spatial relationships and object motion. Every step in each pathway, from the retina to the cerebral cortex, is different in males and females. If you give a blank piece of paper and crayons to young girls, what do you think they would draw? Any ideas?
Flower.
Maybe a flower? Yep. What else might they draw?
Mother or father.
Mum or dad? People? Parents? Yep.
House.
House. What about a boy? If you gave crayons to a young boy, what do you think he's likely to draw?
Car.
Car?
Dad.
Dad?
Bike.
Bike?
Planes. Bikes. Trains.
Planes, bikes, trains?
All of that sort of stuff.
Yep. Well, that's a very interesting observation and pretty accurate. Girls prefer colours like red, orange, green and beige because they are colours P cells are pre-wired to be more sensitive to. Boys prefer colours such as black, grey, silver and blue because that's the way M cells are wired. Studies in young children have shown that girls are better at tasks involving object discrimination. What is it? But boys are better at tasks involving location. Where is it? This helps us to understand why the sexes favour certain toys. A richly textured doll will be more appealing than a moving truck if your system favours the P cells, as it does with girls. We shouldn't be surprised that young females, humans and monkeys, prefer dolls over trucks, while young males, monkeys and humans, prefer trucks over dolls. These preferences are not simply social conditioning, as some would have us believe, but are based on biological differences. Don't get me wrong. I have no problem with a girl playing with a truck if that's what she wants to do, or a boy playing with a doll if he so desires. I'm just pointing out that generally the differences we see in choice of toys relates to biology. Further proof of this is a study done on babies the day they were born by researchers at Cambridge University. The day they were born, so there's no opportunity for social conditioning. They gave babies the choice between looking at a simple dangling mobile with no noise or looking at a live young woman's face. The baby boys were more than twice as likely to prefer the mobile, which dangled and twisted. Where is it? The girls were more likely to look at the young woman's face. An example of how we might see this in the classroom is, again, I'm going to refer to Dr. Leonard Sachs. Miss Kanowski teaches kindergarten. She's given each of her students a blank sheet of paper and told them to draw anything they like using the coloured crayons available to all the children. The teacher walks around the room encouraging each child. She stops by 5-year-old Anita. Anita has about a dozen crayons spread out around her picture of 3 people. The people are facing the viewer, all smiling. Anita's picture is rich in reds, browns, oranges, and flesh tones. That's wonderful, Anita, Miss Kanowski says. Who are those people in the picture? That's me, Anita says, pointing to one of the figures. That's my brother Carlos, and that's my mummy. That's really great, Anita, Miss Kanowski says. Good job. 5-year-old Matthew is frantically scribbling with a black crayon. What's that? Miss Kanowski says. It's a rocket about to smash into the earth, Matthew says gleefully. See, there's the rocket, there's the earth. Miss Kanowski sees that Matthew has only used one crayon, the black crayon, for both the rocket and the earth. There's no colour, no people, no trace of any human anywhere. That's nice, Matthew, Miss Konofsky says, without conviction, despite her best efforts. How about adding a little colour? And is there anyone in the rocket? There is one thing that 5-year-olds, both girls and boys, are very good at: figuring out what the grown-ups like. In this situation, I guarantee you that Matthew understands that his picture doesn't please Miss Konofsky the way Anita's picture does. In her defense, Miss Konofsky is applying the criteria she was taught. Encourage children to draw people-centered pictures using lots of colors. That's what Miss Konofsky learned when she was earning her bachelor's degree in early elementary education. But that old recommendation doesn't take into account what's been learned in the last 20 years about differences in the way both boys and girls see the world. At least 95% of kindergarten teachers are women. Most are not aware of these differences because nobody has ever told them. Instead, the teachers often act like Miss Konofsky, encouraging children to draw pictures of people using lots of colours. 5-year-olds like Anita and Matthew quickly figure out that Anita is doing it right and Matthew is doing it wrong. Matthew will soon discover that he's not very good at trying to copy Anita, that is, trying to draw pictures of people using lots of colours. Matthew will quickly decide that he's no good at art. Only 5 years old, Matthew has decided art is for girls. Other experiences he will have will teach him that he's no good at anything else that's going on in the 21st century gender-neutral kindergarten. The teacher wants him to sit still and be quiet and listen, while he wants to run around and jump and yell. After a few weeks, he's not going to see the point of going to school at all. That's when the tantrums begin. Miss Konofsky wasn't aware of the hardwired differences between the visual world of girls and the visual world of boys. Ironically, the result of her lack of awareness of gender differences is reinforcement of traditional stereotypes. Art is for girls, a traditional gender stereotype. A more informed, gender-aware approach might have broken that stereotype. Think about the differences in the way that men and women give directions. Women typically navigate using landmarks that can be seen or heard or smelt. Just go over there, past the pink house, turn left, and then you go around the lake. Whereas men are more likely to say, if you go north along Sutton Street and then you turn right and you go south to, so they'll be more precise about north-south distance. Whereas we're more likely to be using landmarks, that really nice coffee shop on the corner. We've all heard of the book, Why Men Don't Listen and Women Can't Read Maps. I can read maps as long as it's facing the direction I'm travelling. A study published in 2003 demonstrated that gender differences in navigation is well established by 5 years of age. Now I'm going to look a little bit more about biology of our brains. Scientists have discovered approximately 100 gender differences in the brain. A Harvard study looking at how emotion is processed in the brain of 7 to 17-year-olds found that in young children, the negative emotional activity in response to unpleasant or disturbing visual images seems to be localized in the phylogenetically primitive areas in the brain, specifically in the amygdala. This could be one of the reasons why it doesn't make sense to ask a 7-year-old why she is feeling sad or depressed. The part of the brain that does the talking, up in the cerebral cortex, has few direct connections to the part of the brain where emotion is occurring, down in the amygdala. In adolescence, a further fraction of the brain activity associated with the negative emotion moves up the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain associated with higher cognitive functions such as reflection, reasoning, language, and the like. This change only occurs in girls, however. So the 17-year-old girl is able to explain why she is feeling sad in great detail. In boys, there is no change in maturation. So asking a 17-year-old boy why he's feeling glum may be about as productive as asking a 6-year-old boy. A recent study by a team of German researchers duplicated this finding in young adults. In young women, brain activity associated with negative emotion was mostly up in the cerebral cortex, whereas in young men it remained stuck down in the amygdala. Both positive and negative emotions are processed differently in girls' brains than in boys. Endocrinologist Michael Laidlaw writes, "What does the brain comprise? There are billions of neurons that make up this magnificent structure. Neurons are very specialized cells that transmit and store information. The control center, if you will, of every cell in the body is the nucleus, which contains DNA. The DNA is wound up into specialized units called chromosomes. There are 46 chromosomes in every human cell. 2 of these are specialized chromosomes called sex chromosomes. Assuming normal development, females have 2 X chromosomes and males have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. These sex chromosomes are present in every cell in the body. They remain in the cells from conception until death and do not change." In his review of I Am Jazz, he states, "Since Jazz is male, every cell of his brain has an X and a Y chromosome, whereas a girl brain would have 2 X chromosomes. There is no such thing as a girl's brain in a boy's body or a boy's brain in a girl's body. This is a socially constructed idea by Dr. John Money, reinforced by transgender activists. Feelings are not facts. It has been well known in mental health that mistaking feelings for facts causes psychological distress. A doctor told me that in heart transplants, there is a higher rate of rejection for a male heart in a female body due to the fact females don't have a Y chromosome. In her study of transplants, it turned out to be true across the board that females rejected males' parts right down to the corneal transplants, which is the least risky. Love and sex. The neurochemical basis of both love and sex in females involves the hormone oxytocin, the same hormone released when a mother breastfeeds her newborn baby. Oxytocin's effects on both romantic attachment and sexual behavior are estrogen dependent and gender specific. There appears to be more extensive oxytocin circuits in females than male brains. In males, the hormone underlying sexual attraction is testosterone, the same hormone that mediates the aggressive drive. In brain imaging studies comparing brain areas activated during sexual arousal, men showed lots of activation at the base of the brain, in the thalamus, and especially the hypothalamus. Women showed proportionately more activity up in the cerebral cortex. A 2004 study at Emory University showed that sexually aroused men show more activity in the base of the brain compared to women, even when the woman reported feeling more sexually aroused. It suggests that the sexual experience in women is happening more up in the cerebral cortex, and is therefore more connected with the rest of what's going on in their mind. In men, the sexual experience is less connected with the cortex, less connected with the outside world. Women's sexuality tends to be strongly linked to a close relationship. For women, an important goal of sex is intimacy. The best context of pleasurable sex is a committed relationship. This is less true for men. For many boys, as for men, the sexual urge is closely tied to aggression. The motivation for sex is fundamentally different for most teenage boys compared with teenage girls. Teenage boys want to have sex to satisfy sexual desire. It's a gut level base of the brain impulse. Not so for girls. Psychologist Roy Baumeister writes, male desire aims at the sexual activity itself, whereas female desire aims beyond it towards other outcomes and consequences. I did have a lot more information before I close with another article. A couple of nights ago, I was having a coffee late at night, sitting with my computer, and I tipped the whole cup of coffee over my computer. And so a lot of the information that I had for tonight's presentation was lost for this evening. So I went back over the last 2 days and pulled together from my sources the information. So some of the information I had, I don't have to present this evening, but it's really interesting to see how different we are as males and females. There are hundreds and thousands of differences in our bodies, and it impacts all areas of our life, really. I would like to end with a little bit of a quote from an article written in Psychology Today, and it's titled "The Truth About Sex Differences." It's an elemental fact that people increasingly don't want to hear. Sex differences in personality and behavior are real, and they have a profound effect on many aspects of health. By Dr. David P. Schmidt, PhD, published November 7th, 2017. It's time for a grown-up conversation about sex. No, not that one. The other one, about the minds of men and women. Converging lines of empirical evidence from developmental neuroscience, medical genetics, evolutionary biology, cross-cultural psychology, and new studies of transsexuality, along with our evolutionary heritage, all point to the same conclusion. There are psychological differences between men and women, and they affect matters as trivial as sensitivity to smelly socks and as significant as susceptibility to disorders such as depression and autism. The dramatic physical and behavioral differences between men and women, including size and strength, pubertal timing, consistent patterns around the world of hunting versus gathering and childbearing, as well as pervasive differences in risk-taking, mortality, and reproductive requirements, attest to the likelihood that evolution sculpted adaptations into men and women that make us somewhat different creatures. Psychologically, this sculpting by evolution has left men and women with particular approaches to life and love built upon common core of human nature. Ironically, just as the evidence is mounting that psychological sex differences are real, denial of differences has become rampant. Attempts at respectful and productive conversations about biological sex differences often end with name-calling, genetic determinists, or outright cancellation of events, not to mention the very public firing of a Google software engineer for writing a memo on the topic. And for those of you who might not be aware, there was a Google engineer who wrote a topic about the differences between men and women and actually why men would be more likely to be in the industry of computers and so forth, because we are wired differently. And for that, he was actually fired very publicly for his outrageous claims about the differences between males and females. And yet, they are well proven in science. There are so many differences between men and women. And it's becoming harder, as this article in Psychology Today points out, it's becoming harder to have an honest, respectful conversation about the differences, because the moment you actually mention that we have differences, the debate is shut down by people who would say, well, you're just a bigot or you have a phobia of some kind. And so it's becoming more and more important for us to actually look at the scientific evidence, to look at the research, the differences between men and women, because as you could see, there's very real consequences for the boy in the classroom misdiagnosed with ADD, ending up on medication that he doesn't need, when all he actually needs is to be in a better position in the classroom to be able to hear better. For the loss of self-esteem because you don't fit the box that we believe everyone should fit into this box. So we're actually trying to get away from stereotyping and at the same time putting these ridiculous stereotypes on people. So thank you so much for making the effort to come out to this evening's presentation about the biological differences between men and women. I will be around to talk to and to answer questions afterwards. Thanks so much.